A distant tremor rolled across the steppe long before the first Mongol rider became visible, a vibration so deep that survivors later swore it felt like the earth itself warning of a coming reckoning. As dawn stretched into a thin ribbon of pale gold, mounted silhouettes emerged over the horizon in unnervingly perfect formation, their movements synchronized with a discipline that defied the chaos of battle. Ancient chroniclers wrote with trembling ink that the land itself obeyed them, a phrase born from watching kingdoms shrink into insignificance at the sight of a single Mongol vanguard. Rulers who once believed their borders unassailable felt their authority collapse inward as word spread of settlements wiped out before their messengers could finish sounding the alarm. Merchants fleeing across dusty caravan roads carried stories of entire towns swallowed by smoke so quickly that even birds abandoned the skies above them. Archaeologists excavating a Khwarezmian frontier outpost uncovered arrowheads fused into molten stone, the result of firepower and speed wielded with devastating precision. Walls reinforced for siege warfare lay cracked open, as though struck by forces beyond human strength. Refugees from regions along the Sirdaria recalled an eerie stillness settling over their cities in the hours before impact, a suffocating quiet suggesting that even the wind feared to move. Women shut their doors, children hid beneath woven mats, and elders prayed to gods who seemed to fall silent at the approach of hooves. Yet scattered among the ruins lies evidence of a mystery that confounded historians. A recovered royal map, browned by age and warped from heat, marks a narrow valley with a thick circle of ink, an unmistakable warning. Strangely, records confirm that Mongol forces marching toward that region turned aside at the last moment, avoiding the valley entirely despite its strategic advantage. Their precision made such deviations rare, and commanders known for relentless advance did not alter routes without profound reason. What danger waited along that forbidden stretch of land? And why did even the empire that prided itself on fearing nothing refuse to enter it? Wind carried coded signals across entire continents as the Mongol Yam network transformed the open steppe into a living organism of information. Long before the first army appeared on any horizon, scouts disguised as wandering traders, camel herders, artisans, or monks slipped quietly through border towns, observing without drawing attention. They counted defenders, noted shortages in granaries, memorized the width of city gates, and listened for disputes between nobles that might reveal weaknesses. Months later, when Mongol envoys arrived demanding submission, they already possessed knowledge that made resistance a slow form of suicide. Persian administrators confessed in later chronicles that Mongol spies had sat in their guest halls, shared bread with their families, and asked seemingly innocent questions long before the first arrow flew. Excavations along abandoned relay roads reveal bronze seals used by covert couriers racing between Yam stations at unimaginable speed, their surfaces worn smooth from ceaseless use. These stations formed the skeleton of an empire that moved intelligence faster than any army could respond, allowing commanders to strike with surgical timing. In a surviving Tangut diary, an official wrote by dim lamplight, "We were surrounded even when the plains looked empty," capturing the psychological devastation engineered by this hidden network. Villagers reported feeling watched, though no riders appeared. Caravan travelers spoke of mysterious figures disappearing into ravines before sunrise. Rumors of unseen patrols created fear long before invasion, softening the will to resist. The Mongols' mastery of information meant that cities often fell without prolonged siege. Gates opened not from battering rams but from despair, as people believed the enemy already knew every weakness. Even generals who attempted rebellion found themselves intercepted with uncanny accuracy. Yet among the preserved scraps of intercepted messages lies one scroll more troubling than the rest. It begins with routine intelligence, population counts, irrigation damage, market disputes, before abruptly naming a remote settlement absent from major maps. The parchment tears off mid-sentence, as though the writer stopped with sudden urgency. No further record mentions the village. No commander lists it among conquered sites. No chronicle explains its importance. What secret lay hidden in that forgotten place? And why did the Mongol intelligence web isolate it for destruction long before any neighboring region was touched? Inside fortified cities, defenders watched in paralyzed disbelief as Mongol engineers transformed open fields into workshops of destruction. Timber groaned, rope snapped taut, and counterweights thudded into place with a rhythm that undid like death learning to speak. Chroniclers in China and Persia wrote that these machines rose faster than walls could crumble, for Mongol commanders brought with them experts captured from Khwarezm, Jin, and Song lands, shaping an international corps of unwilling specialists. These artisans, now bound by fear instead of loyalty, assembled trebuchets and catapults with a speed unmatched by any European force of the era. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of Zhangdu discovered jagged wall stones split by impacts from projectiles heavier than anything previously recorded. Their surfaces display heat patterns, suggesting that flaming resin had soaked into the stone itself before ignition. Soot layers nearby hold residues from burning oil, bones of birds used for disease transmission, and traces of rotting tissue that once belonged to carcasses hurled over battlements to infect entire districts. Every strike served as both physical ruin and psychological assault, sending defenders scrambling under skies thick with smoke and terror. Emotional testimonies from survivors recount nights when the horizon glowed red as if dawn had arrived early, only for collapsing towers to reveal that it was firelight, not sunlight, painting the sky. Mothers pressed children beneath woven mats as missiles screamed overhead. Priests whispered prayers that no longer felt heard. One survivor wrote that a single night of bombardment felt longer than a lifetime lived under peace. The Mongols used more than brute force. Their siege engineers studied the architecture of every city they approached, identifying weaknesses in stone composition, gate reinforcement, and tower alignment. They built traction trebuchets for rapid assault and counterweight trebuchets for long-distance devastation. Their machines hurled stones, clay jars filled with burning pitch, and even vats of molten substances capable of chewing through wooden roofs. Some records hint that they experimented with early forms of explosive mixtures, derived from captured Chinese alchemical knowledge. Yet deep beneath a ruined gate on the Khwarezm frontier, archaeologists uncovered a scorched beam carrying markings that defy known Mongol engineering patterns. The symbols carved into the charred wood resemble neither Chinese, Khitan, Turkic, nor Persian systems of notation. They appear older, angular, and professionally inscribed, suggesting an engineering tradition not identified among Mongol records or their conquered peoples. If these markings do not match documented siege techniques, then another question emerges from the ashes. Was an unknown culture's secret knowledge employed in the assault, and who delivered it into Mongol hands? Rumors traveled faster than Mongol arrows, and in the years of their expansion, these rumors became weapons crafted with deliberate precision. Along caravan routes, terrified merchants recited accounts of cities swallowed in a single afternoon. They spoke of rivers clogged with bodies, of walls collapsing before defenders could lift their shields, and of survivors mutilated and sent ahead as harbingers of doom. By the time Mongol riders reached a border, fear had already conquered half the land for them. Diplomatic letters preserved in Georgian archives reveal the trembling uncertainty of rulers who received conflicting reports of Mongol strength. One king wrote that resisting was to battle the sky itself, a phrase revealing how myth swallowed reality. Envoys described the Mongols as guided by spirits of the steppe, protected by omens seen in the sudden migrations of birds. Monarchs doubted whether mortal armies could challenge a force believed to march with divine approval. The Mongols encouraged these beliefs. They weaponized terror with precision equal to their battlefield tactics. Before attacking a city, they sometimes released a handful of captives who had witnessed Mongol cruelty firsthand. These survivors returned home with fresh scars, missing ears, or mutilated hands, their bodies serving as living documents of what awaited any who resisted. Such acts were calculated, not chaotic. They were designed to fracture morale before the first strike. Archaeological excavations along the Volga uncovered mass graves containing skeletons arranged in disturbing configurations. Some bodies lie positioned in radiating lines, skulls turned outward as if watching every direction at once. Others form geometric patterns suggesting ritual intention. These arrangements imply staged displays meant not for grieving families, but for future observers, messages carved not into stone, but into human remains. Villagers passing these sites would carry tales into distant lands, amplifying fear before the Mongols ever arrived. Emotional fragments from Armenian chronicles describe entire families fleeing their homes upon hearing a single rumor of approaching riders. One account tells of an entire mountain village evacuating overnight, leaving behind unfinished meals, scattered tools, and cradle-bound infants hastily carried into the hills. The chronicler wrote, "Fear galloped ahead of them," capturing how psychological warfare reshaped entire landscapes. In some regions, Mongol commanders used deception to magnify dread. They lit hundreds of extra campfires at night to inflate the perceived size of their armies. They dragged tree branches behind their horses to create clouds of dust mimicking vast forces on the move. They released prisoners in armor stolen from fallen enemies to spread false intelligence. In siege warfare, they sometimes launched severed heads over walls accompanied by letters demanding surrender, allowing terror to deliver what weapons had not yet touched. But in rare cases, Mongol records reveal decisions that defy their established logic of fear. A coded directive discovered in a Persian ruin describes a town ordered to be spared. The directive includes a list of horrors inflicted on neighboring settlements, followed by an abrupt shift. This place is to remain untouched. No justification is written. No explanation follows. The name of the commander responsible for the order is erased by deliberate scraping of the parchment. Why would the Mongols show mercy in a conquest known for calculated terror? Did the spared town pay tribute through secret channels? Did it harbor someone the Mongols sought to protect? Or did a hidden bargain unfold beneath the chaos of war, overshadowed by fear and wrapped in silence? The psychological devastation inflicted by the Mongols reshaped not only the conquered, but the historical memory of entire continents. Yet within this web of terror lies a single anomaly, a mercy unexplained, a decision that contradicts the empire's darkest methods. What truth hides behind that moment of restraint, and why was it buried beneath centuries of fear? Conquest did not end when the Mongol banners rose above a shattered gate. It continued in the shadowed offices where administrators, clerks, and scribes determined the fate of every surviving soul. These officials wielded a power sharper than any blade, for they decided who would live, who would be moved, and who would simply disappear into the machinery of empire. Surviving decrees from Karakoram reveal a chilling precision. Entire districts categorized according to usefulness, their populations sorted by skill. Artisans were shipped across continents to fortify Mongol cities. Metalworkers traveled to armories in distant steppes. Scribes were forced to copy state edicts in languages they barely understood. Each decision further tightened the empire's grasp on the conquered. Archaeologists excavating administrative sites in Samarkand uncovered ledgers carved onto wooden panels, each line filled with numbers representing families torn from their homes. These records list thousands assigned to forced labor, but names appear only rarely. Most entries begin with a profession: potter, smith, weaver, followed by weight-based quotas rather than human details. This conversion of identity into inventory reflects a world in which human value was measured by productivity, not origin or lineage. Tools found beside these ledgers bear grooves from frantic handling, as if scribes worked under fear of punishment should they miscalculate the worth of a life. Emotional passages in Goryeo documents offer glimpses of the suffering that followed these administrative decisions. One account describes children removed from their families under an order stating necessity for empire, a phrase repeated in multiple surviving edicts. Witnesses wrote that mothers tried to barter jewelry, heirlooms, and even their own labor in exchange for their children, but the administrators remained unmoved. Their duty was to supply the empire with human resources, and compassion had no place in their calculations. As one chronicler lamented, "Ink chose destinies, and ink did not bleed." The Mongols also weaponized categorization to crush resistance. Nobles were evaluated according to their influence rather than their loyalty. If considered valuable, they were forcibly incorporated into Mongol bureaucracy. If deemed dangerous, they were executed, exiled, or sold into bondage. Some nobles were allowed limited autonomy in exchange for tribute, but others vanished entirely, their estates seized, and their family lines extinguished. A Persian court record describes a nobleman summoned for negotiation who never returned. His possessions were redistributed before dusk, and not a single document mentions his fate. Yet the harshest decisions targeted entire communities suspected of resisting Mongol rule. One decree sealed with Urgeday's emblem references a settlement erased from all categories. No trades listed, no professions recorded, no slaves assigned. Only the settlement's name appears, followed by a blank space where administrative notes should have been. Every other village in the region received classification, but this one was removed from the system entirely, as if its people had been struck from existence without acknowledgement. Archaeologists investigating the area found no bodies, no ruins, no signs of mass escape. Only fragments of charred pottery and the faint outline of foundations remain. The absence itself becomes a historical wound, raising questions buried beneath centuries of dust. What threat did its people pose that even documentation was denied? And why did the Mongol administrators choose silence over record in a bureaucracy that recorded everything else? After cities fell silent beneath ash and broken timbers, long lines of captives began their march into the unknown. Mountains, deserts, and frozen plains became the corridors through which defeated populations were driven toward markets, labor camps, or distant garrisons. Contemporary chronicles describe these marches with a horror that still reverberates across centuries. Prisoners trudged through snow so deep it drowned their footsteps. Riders overseeing them spoke rarely, relying on raised brows, whip cracks, or spear taps to maintain order. Archaeological surveys along the old Mongol road system reveal haunting traces of these journeys. Abandoned sandals clustered near steep passes suggest captives who collapsed or whose feet bled beyond endurance. Broken wooden tags lie scattered along the routes, once tied around captives, next to denote origin or labor assignment. Some tags bear scratch marks where prisoners tried to carve their names, only to have the wood splinter under the pressure of their hope. Ropes discovered in nearby ravines show fraying that indicates desperate attempts to escape, attempts that almost always failed. Emotional echoes of these marches survive in the laments of Central Asian poets, who wrote of mothers whispering their children's names repeatedly so the little ones would not forget themselves after their identities were stripped away. One poem describes a woman tracing her daughter's name into the dust with a trembling finger as soldiers forced them forward. Another mentions captives singing at dusk not for comfort, but to remind themselves that voices still lived within their bodies. The destinations varied. Some captives became artisans in Mongol capitals, crafting armor or weaving textiles. Others were absorbed into armies as auxiliary forces. Many vanished entirely into mines, quarries, or frontier outposts. The Mongol administrative machine consumed them without record, leaving modern historians with only fragments to reconstruct their lives. Yet one discovery interrupts this pattern of anonymity. Along a northern route near a collapsed checkpoint, archaeologists unearthed a burial mound containing a single skeleton. Unlike the mass graves typical of the marches, this burial held a solitary body laid carefully on its side. Beside the bones rested a golden ornament of exceptional craftsmanship, shaped like a rising sun. No tools, ropes, or identification markers accompanied it. No documents referenced the death. And no local memory explains the grave. Someone honored this captive. Someone broke the enforced anonymity of the marches, risking punishment to grant one individual a moment of remembrance. Who was this person, and why was their identity preserved when so many others faded into silence? Some cities endured the aftermath of conquest, forced to rebuild their walls and mourn their dead. Others vanished so completely that their names survive only in distant chronicles, preserved by the pens of travelers who never imagined their words would become the last record of entire civilizations. Charred foundations uncovered in northern Iran reveal districts leveled with deliberate precision, their stone structures not toppled by battle, but shattered through systematic destruction. Historians examining these sites note scorch patterns that indicate controlled burning, a method used to erase communities that resisted Mongol authority. The devastation suggests an intention not merely to conquer, but to ensure that no memory of resistance could endure within the landscape itself. Mongol reports written in Uyghur script use the word purification to describe such operations. Scholars believe this term marked a category of annihilation reserved for populations deemed irredeemably rebellious. The word appears in campaigns against the Khwarezmians, the Tanguts, and smaller city-states whose names now surface only as smudges in damaged manuscripts. Archaeological teams excavating these ruins often find personal objects, bracelets, writing tablets, children's toys, trapped beneath collapsed beams, reminders that destruction fell upon ordinary lives as swiftly as upon armies. In some locations, soil layers show repeated burning, suggesting that the conquerors left fires smoldering long after the final screams had faded. Emotional recollections from scattered survivors recount journeys back to their former homes, only to find nothing be but wind, ash, and scattered bones whitening under the sun. One testimony preserved in a Persian anthology tells of a man who recognized a single stone from his family's courtyard wall. Everything else had been leveled, the water channels filled, the grain stores plundered, the garden stripped bare. These stories carry the weight of grief that extends beyond personal loss, for the destruction of a city meant the erasure of its festivals, dialects, and shared history. When a city disappeared under Mongol rule, its disappearance echoed across generations. Yet one set of ruins disrupts the expected pattern. Excavations revealed burnt walls arranged in a near-perfect circle, forming a boundary around an untouched central square. The surrounding houses were destroyed in identical fashion, their wooden beams reduced to cinders and their stone supports cracked from extreme heat. Inside the central square, however, traces of human activity remain. A well lined with unscorched bricks, fragments of pottery unmarked by fire, and a small stone platform bearing chisel marks that differ from the city's original architectural style. This untouched space stands as an anomaly within a landscape otherwise consumed by destruction. Scholars debate the reason for this preservation. Some propose that the square served a functional purpose, perhaps as a staging ground for Mongol forces. Others suggest it held spiritual significance for the conquerors, though no inscriptions confirm such a theory. A third possibility, considered by a minority of researchers, is that the untouched square served as a warning. Its emptiness, surrounded by devastation, may have symbolized the power of the Mongol Empire to choose what lived and what died. Preserving the center while annihilating everything around it could have communicated a message sharper than any written decree. Still, debates persist because physical evidence alone cannot answer the question. The formation appears intentional, too symmetrical to be coincidence, too precise to result from natural forces. No chronicles reference this particular city, and no surviving oral traditions describe its destruction. What remains is the inexplicable contrast between ruin and preservation, a silence recorded in stone rather than ink. Why was this lone space spared? And what message did the conquerors leave behind for those bold enough to search for meaning among the ashes? Centuries after the Mongol Empire fractured into successor states, scholars continue to trace its path through ruins, chronicles, and whispered folklore. The devastation it carved across Eurasia shaped cultural memory from Eastern Europe to the South China Sea. Entire regions still carry stories of riders who descended without warning, leaving behind scorched fields and depopulated valleys. Each broken siege bolt displayed in a museum stands as a steel reminder of the speed with which kingdoms fell. These artifacts, though silent, speak of strategies that combine mobility, discipline, and fear with unprecedented precision. Modern historians debate the nature of Mongol power. Some argue they were strategic geniuses who built the largest contiguous empire through calculated brilliance. Others describe them as architects of terror who perfected destruction into a science. Both interpretations draw from evidence scattered across medieval manuscripts, battlefield remains, and administrative archives. Emotional resonance lingers in ancestral stories told beside fires, recounting villages that vanished overnight or families who fled before scouts reached their gates. These tales blend fact with memory, reflecting trauma passed down through generations. New archaeological discoveries continue to complicate the narrative. Excavations in Central Asia reveal layers of burned earth beneath later settlements, indicating repeated cycles of destruction and rebuilding. In some regions, pottery styles shift abruptly, hinting at population replacements following massacres or forced migrations. Decorative motifs disappear entirely, replaced by designs imported from distant territories under Mongol control. Each clue deepens the puzzle, showing how conquest reshaped cultures in ways that even chroniclers struggled to articulate. Yet one newly analyzed inscription disrupts established interpretations, Carved into a stone slab hidden beneath a collapsed caravanserai, the inscription references the night when even conquerors trembled. The context is unclear. No known battle caused significant Mongol losses in the region, and no record mentions panic among troops famed for their discipline. Scholars examining the slab note that its lettering style predates the surrounding architecture, indicating it may have been placed there deliberately to avoid discovery. The phrase raises unsettling questions. If the Mongols who terrified vast continents experienced fear during a particular event, what force confronted them? Was it a natural disaster, a rebellion, a supernatural omen interpreted through steppe beliefs, or something erased from official accounts? The silence in corresponding records suggests an intentional effort to conceal whatever unfolded that night. What event instilled fear in warriors who had terrified the world? And why does its shadow still linger across the ruins of empires they once controlled?